The Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook by using promo code RTRS, and brought to you by LL Pavorsky Jewelers, where Rights to Ricky Sanchez listeners go and get engaged. Kornblau & Kornblau, the official law firm of The Process. Adam Kasabi, the official realtor of The Process at processrealtor.com. And Kinetic Skateboarding. Get 9.1% off your first order with promo code Dave Silver. On today's pod, an on-pod AMA came straight from Reddit. We're taping this just before you're hearing it on Saturday. This is being taped on Saturday.
It's Saturday, and boy, are my arms tired from the week that was.
Woo! So much week this week. And also, in the second half of the pod, you will get the exclusive audio of Mike and I as keynote speakers at the Cal State Fullerton Modern Languages and Literature annual conference. This is
How did that go, by the way?
Oh, it was fucking awesome. We were so honored, right? And it went great because it already happened, and we're just giving you the audio. Yep, we always have a lot to say.
That's right.
And as well, at the very end of the pod, Michael Bivens of Bell Biv DeVoe and New Edition will join us to talk a little NBA and Sixers and Celtics. Without any further ado, Amos and the Chef.
We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We was right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We were right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. Say the name.
Welcome to the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. I'm Spike Eskin, along with a guy who now has keynote speaker on his resume, Mike Levin.
Hell yeah. We spoke those keynotes. We hit all the right notes.
Yep.
And you know, learned a little something in the process. And
yeah.
So did our students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's students.
Good.
Yeah, we're keynote speakers. We're available for all keynote speaking. Just send a note to our agent, and our agent will take care of you. Our agent
fee is very high, and it is worth it.
Yep. Our agent is Abby at Dig Rupert on Twitter. Abby will take care of you. She is our agent. So the first part of the pod is our on-pod AMA. Our on-pod AMA is brought to you by Kinetic Skateboarding. We have so much Delaware shit between Kasabi and Kinetic. I love Kinetic Skateboarding. I buy so many clothes, so many hoodies, so many sneakers, so many pants from Kinetic Skateboarding. And if I was a skateboarder, I would buy them there too. 9.1% off your first order with promo code DaveSilver at kineticskateboarding.com. So an awesome pair of Vans I think I'm gonna get. I haven't bought a pair of slip-on Vans in so long. I think I'm gonna do it. So we did I asked on Reddit for AMA questions. We will do them in order of how they've been upvoted. So the most popular questions will go, and then the ones that we don't get to, I'll go onto Reddit and answer there, at least from my perspective. So this first one comes from Girlfriend Pregnant. If you guys had to switch, Girlfriend Pregnant has been a regular Reddit person who I think defends us. So God bless Girlfriend Pregnant. If you guys had to switch your off-pod jobs, Mike runs a radio station and Spike writes sitcoms, who would get fired first?
Probably me.
I think I could hide out in the writer's room.
You could.
A little bit, yeah.
You could. I would do a bad job.
Yeah.
I would. Yeah. I don't think our list. I don't think my taste and style would be well liked.
I think the first meeting between you, the first you and Angelo meeting, is something that should be broadcast. I think that might not go over so great.
You wouldn't get fired. You would last the season and maybe not get asked back. You know, that's kind of good.
Yeah.
Most people are too scared to fire people.
Yeah.
And I think just be like, and you'd be like, oh, sorry, just ran out of money in the budget. Oh no, so sorry, but you're so valuable, whatever it was. But I feel like in the more corporate world,
It's
that would be a pretty quick hook.
It's something that I've honestly has taken me 15 years to even figure out how to do, because I can normally be a pretty temperamental person, but you can't doing what I do. So, and then b-ball question. We got a non-basketball and basketball. Is it possible that Furkan is good? Related question, with a corner 3 guy with a tiny petite feet be an advantage? Could you see Jay Billis say something like, this guy's a great shooter and he's got the tiniest feet measured in the draft? Is it possible? I think Furk could be rotation good, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I think Korkmaz is an interesting player. He is, not including last Wednesday, going into last Wednesday, his numbers were, he is getting fewer, he's shooting worse from 2-point range, and better from the ability on his plate. That's why his turnovers are up and everything. But I do think the shot is real, and he shoots it high, and he's big. And I wonder why he's not a better foul shooter sometimes. Eye test wise, he's a career 77% foul shooter, which is good. It's not excellent for
he should be 84.
Marksman. But it's to the eye test, it feels like he misses a lot of free throws. He doesn't go to the line much, so I guess one will count for a lot. But I think he's going to be good because he's 23 years old. When he's 27, 26, 27, he's going to be a real basketball player, and I would not be surprised to see him start on a decent team as just a floor spacer and a secondary ball handler and stuff. Absolutely.
Well, he's got a good feel for the game. He's got the Euro feel for the game. I think it's funny, he makes good passes even though he makes bad passes too. And I actually when he's running pick and roll, it's not bad. He's got a pretty decent handle. It's not super tight, but it's not bad. I think I'm a big Furk guy now. This came from, and I think he was on on both of our big boards that year. Actually, Furk was,
and was proven wrong for a little and then right for a while. That's how it goes. Luau, same thing.
This came from Bob Luau was on both of our big boards. I remember thinking that Brian Colangelo drafted both of those guys just to make us happy.
Sure.
This came from Bob Sacamano. Hey guys, this question is for Michael Bivens. If you were to we'll answer it. Michael's not here yet. If you were to make a trade solely focused on improving team vibes, who would come in and who would go out?
Bob Sacramento is a Seinfeld reference. Just saying.
Oh yes, it is.
As vibes, it.
Well, you can trade out fucking Poirier, so nobody's gonna care. I don't think there's any.
Poirier. People are very excited about Poirier on the team. Tall Frenchman. There's a weird factor. Yeah, I mean Poirier, Ferguson.
Oh yeah, Ferguson.
The sneaky answer. I don't know how embedded. Seth feels like he just is a professional, handles his own business. Tobias is integral. I think Matisse is integral. I think Dwight is integral. Obviously,
Shake, I don't know.
Shake is the question.
Yeah,
Shake is the question. I think that, I think the bench units have a good chemistry, and that him and Matisse and Korkmaz especially kind of came up together, been there for a couple years now, worked through some stuff. I feel like there's a community there. But Shake is also a private guy. I think it's very much a little bit of a solitary dude. So I think that I don't know how. I wonder what Shake's role in the
locker
just
room,
personal aspect of the team is. Yeah.
Yeah. And coming in, I don't know. I mean, bring in TJ. If we're talking about vibes, that would be a fucking enormous vibe.
What is a vibe? What is a kind of person that you think this team needs? Because you have Dwight as the like
Goofball.
old guy and also a goofball. You have Embiid as like the cocky, punch in the mouth big man. Simmons like stoic. Tobias leader. Danny goofy old guy with has some success. A couple young guys. We might need a guy, and you might be able to replace Shake or Seth with a shooter that has a little bit more cockiness to him. Maybe like Terrence Ross energy.
Yeah, I mean, they need somebody who's, not that anybody on the team is scared, but somebody who is overconfident and also good.
Nick Young. I forgot. I didn't hear the
Nick
almost
Young.
good part. Also good before I started talking.
Well, Nick Young is great for vibes unless you're D'Angelo Russell,
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with Nick Young.
That was on Nick Young.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we answered this on the last pod that we recorded on Wednesday several days ago, but just giving credit to Log Lady 420. Out of Shake, Maxey, and Matisse, who would you want to keep most? I said Shake, and I think you would probably be Matisse. Am I crazy or no?
In a trade where Danny leaves, I think it's probably Matisse. Yeah, if Danny leaves and Lowry comes in, I'd give the edge to Matisse. But I love Shake, and I really want to see what he can become.
This comes from Best Bry. Who would you rather have start a playoff game against the Raptors, Greg Monroe or Vincent Poirier?
Right now, right. Greg Monroe or Greg Monroe then?
No, right now.
Probably Poirier. He's bad. He's certainly bad. I think there's also a sense of when you're the last guy off the bench, you come in for the last 2 minutes of a game, blowout, whatever.
You're gonna suck. Yeah.
You're gonna suck. I think there's a lot of whatever. I think in a structured offense, Poirier could come in and do most of what Tony Bradley is doing right now. It's just not. It's not. Look, I say this as a guy that's 5'11". It's not hard to be a fine to bad, but not horrendous 7-foot guy in the NBA. Like, you got long arms, you're big. You just set screens like crazy and decide you want to do it, and then you roll, and you rebound. And guys are going to score on you and be willing to get dunked on and just get back up. Like, it's fine. It's not hard. And I think Greg Monroe has a little bit of Okafor in him in the sense that he thinks he's still good. Poirier doesn't think he's good. He knows he's Vincent.
Yeah,
Poirier.
he knows he's sucked. You said that before. I had somebody, I forget whether it was text me or email me, questioning your 5'11-ness. Last time you said you were 5'11. Are you doubling down on your 5'11-ness?
I'm 5'11", and I play bigger. In fact,
I just had a question. Somebody, I didn't say a word. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
If I was doubling down, I'd say I'm 6 foot, and I'm not. I'm not.
This comes from EEET. If punched in the face by a Sixers player who would most deserve it for the takes/hate he has expressed against the player, Mike punched by Tobias or Spike punched by Ben? So I think he's asking who deserves to be punched more. It would certainly be me by Ben, not you by Tobias, right?
It's probably you. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a healthy amount of criticism that someone gives. Like, I think we talk about Zach Lowe all the time because I think he's great, and we had him on his podcast, and I don't listen to a ton of other NBA podcasts.
And he had him on ours, or he had us on his, which was amazing.
Right. And so he had Jordan Clarkson on his podcast, and I think in a very upfront way, hey, I didn't think you were this good. You got this contract. I thought it was a bad contract. I said this thing, and you have proven me wrong. Like, I think there's there's the ability to say that kind of thing and feel like, look, we're talking about basketball for a living. I'm going to say if I don't think this person's good. If I said everybody's good, then I'm like somebody on a broadcast. I'm John Gruden's broadcast persona. So it's like, well, what's that for? And so with Tobias, I was like, look, man, I would have an honest to God conversation, and I would love to get Tobias on the podcast so he could punch me next live show. We should get Tobias on because he can decide if he wants to punch me himself.
Yeah, I don't think, I think there's, he wrote hate. Like, what we do is we watch basketball and we say what we think. Like, there's no, I don't think, unless you're personal about it or like, I don't think anybody should feel bad about any of those things. And by the way, I could understand why a player would be frustrated by it. Like, I can certainly understand both sides, but I don't think anybody deserves, like, I know he or she is being facetious here, but I don't think anybody deserves to be punched for their fucking opinion about basketball, except for maybe some anti-process people. But, this comes from Baba Brody. Did you guys ever get your PS5s from B-Ball Paul? I sent him $1,100 3 weeks ago. I still haven't received a tracking number or even a confirmation email. I know he's busy with B-Ball and all, but his customer service is seriously lacking. I have not.
Do you feel good? Do you feel... I can't remember. I feel like the nickname B-Ball Paul obviously comes from his Twitter account, but I feel like it wasn't everywhere until it became like, I told you that it was B-Ball Paul. Do you feel that?
I believe that the pod started B-Ball Pauling it up before anybody else did. I do.
And now, I mean, I love that Matt Cord calls him that.
Yep.
It's like, it's great. I wonder how B-Ball Paul thinks about it. Because it's a little bit, like, it's a very
goofy.
Pure thing, calling yourself B-Ball Paul on Twitter. But it's also like, that's so lame it, like, sort of wraps back around.
Yes.
And I wonder how does he feel like, why are they fucking, my last name's Reed. Like, I don't know. I do wonder if he feels any regret for naming his Twitter account. And maybe let's check. When did he name his Twitter account? B-Ball Paul.
And by the way, I want to be clear. That was the name of his Twitter account. No one ever said that was his nickname. Like,
right. That's true. And now he goes by it. February 2012. So that was 9 years ago.
That he's been
and he is 22. So he was 13 when he made his Twitter account B-Ball Paul.
Well, he could have changed it, though.
I'm assuming he did not.
Okay.
What was it then? I mean, it would have been something even dumber. Like my AOL handle, which was
Dragon Ball Z Paul, maybe.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
That'd also be a cool nickname. But I do wonder if he is thinking like, it's horses out of the barn a little bit.
Yeah, well, he's B-Ball Paul. I don't know what he, how he feels about it, but unless he's got a real problem with it, he's going to be B-Ball Paul. Mm-hmm. This comes from Regit Joe. Would you rather have an all Danny Green team where the offense relies on transition pull-up threes, or an all Tyrese Maxey team where the offense relies on 5 pretending they might shoot but relentlessly/fruitlessly attacking the rim?
Probably the second one.
Yeah, I mean, with the all Danny Green team, the dribbling. He was one Danny Green on the Spurs, and he almost cost them a championship because he's so bad at dribbling. Or he might have. That might have been the one that he won. I don't think that you can exist with an all Danny Green team.
Wow.
Few more. This comes from Hell Reaver. What's the biggest realistic, in your opinion, trade you would make by the deadline, assuming Lowry is not an option? I don't think there's a big trade to be made if it's not Lowry. Like, I keep mentioning George Hill. I think that's like the sort of trade you're looking at if it's not Lowry.
Yeah. Well, PJ Tucker's gone. Obviously, if there had been any trades between Wednesday and now, we know them, and those guys are gone.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it yet because everybody knows.
We're not going to mention it, but we know what it is, and those guys are gone. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance that Orlando decides, let's just clean house and get rid of some guys. And I wonder if Evan Fournier or Terrence Ross would come here. And that, to me, would qualify as like a pretty big trade to get Fournier or Ross in here. But you really just can't acquire any more non-shooters. It's kind of just, as much as I love Thad and think that's exciting, the idea of getting Thad in here basically for all of the non-Simmons minutes, just not playing them together. It's just hard to do. So anybody that's a shooter, and there's just not that many shooters available, that you would qualify as like a huge trade. And I don't think Levine's going to go. I don't think Beal's going to go. And if Lowry does, that'd be one. But other than that, it's probably the Orlando guys. There's just because with the playing game, a lot of teams out here thinking that they can compete. And I don't know if the lottery odds are the reshifting of the lottery odds has changed anything for them, but there's not that many teams in each conference that are not have a close shot to get to the play-in game. So
yeah, like in the East, Washington's got a shot, and I think they're like 14-24. They're not far out of it.
Yeah, and I like the play-in game, by the way. I love the idea of a play-in game.
It's fine.
I think the play-in game is a bigger deal to stopping tanking than
shifting lottery odds.
Shifting some lottery odds a little bit.
Yeah. Real estate market is fucking hot, Mike. It's hot right now. Hot. Homes are going like hotcakes.
Don't I know it?
You know it. So you're probably thinking about buying a house. Actually, a coworker, one-time Ricky helper at a live show, Jack Fritz and his lovely wife, Jill. That's right, Jack and Jill. They just bought a house. Doing it because interest rates are low. So that means a much lower payment, which means you're saving such huge money over the course of the loan. Adam Kasebe, Ksebe, is our official realtor. Started as Delaware Beach realtor, right? Because Delaware beaches are beautiful. You get low property taxes. You rent it out for most of the year. You go for a couple weeks a year. Boom. What an investment that is. But now they've expanded. So it is a team of process trusting realtors all the way from Newcastle County, which is Wilmington, all the way down to the Delaware beaches. So can take care of you anywhere. And as an aside, if you want to buy a house in PA, New Jersey, go to Adam Kasebe. He will hook you up with the right person. Or if you want to refinance, which I'm telling you, if you have an interest rate over like 3.25, you should probably refinance. He'll hook you up with his refinance team. They'll do that. If you move, if you're already in Newcastle County and you go down to southern Delaware, by the Delaware shore, he's going to pay
Take the trek down to southern Delaware. Get your rowboat, pack your Oregon Trail situation.
And drive 25 minutes.
And drive and to hit 3 to 4 stoplights.
I'm telling you, man. I'm thinking about, my wife and I are going to Lewis this summer for a week, Lewis Beach. I think it really seriously thinking about buying a home down there. And when I do, I will eventually. It'll be with Kasebe. Like I said, anywhere in Delaware or even outside of Delaware, Adam's your guy. The Kasebe team based out of Long and Foster in Bethany Beach, every square inch of Delaware, every beach location. No Jersey beaches, Delaware beaches. Delaware Beach is only here. 302-864-8643. 302-864-8643. You can call or text or email adam@processrealtor.com. This comes from King Wentz, the B-ball Paul of Reddit, in a name that you might want to adjust. My question's on a similar vein as some others. Danny Green is expiring, which is part of what makes him an attractive trade piece. If we do retain him, what do you think he would cost next year? How much longer do you think he has in his career? He's got a couple years, right?
That's a good question. I think you would give Danny Green like a mid-level exception type of thing, like a 2 years, $20 million type of deal. With the idea, which is sort of what Miami does, is like, and also what I was gonna say Boston or Toronto, but that's not really true. I think what Miami does, which is like sign a bunch of guys to a couple of tradable contracts, so then you can then stack them together and move them if need be. So you'd sign Danny to a contract going like, okay, this is going to match salary in like either this year or next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a $10 million player, right? You know what was shocking, seeing that trade of Trevor Ariza, that Trevor Ariza is still playing. I had no fucking idea that Trevor Ariza was still in the NBA. The Heat.
Well, he wasn't. He wasn't this year. I don't think he reported to Oklahoma City.
Oh, okay, maybe that's why I didn't know.
Thing from last year when he was in Memphis.
Oh, right. This comes from Hilliu. I didn't do any research on this. Build a starting five around Iverson using only currently active NBA players in the NBA. Cool. You can max one star.
Okay.
As and with Iverson as the indisputable best player on the team. So no one from the top 7 range. So one other all-star you can max, but no top 7 player. So Iverson has to be the best player.
Okay. This is cool. I think you would like maybe this makes you Oklahoma City, but I think you kind of like a Paul George.
Paul George. Yeah. I was going to say that.
Wouldn't be in there. I think maybe you could say a Brad Beal. Yeah, I would say let's do Paul George. Let's do Lou Dort, because why not? And then let's do like a
Iggy.
It's a little too old. Could we say Jeremy?
Jeremy would be great. Yeah, I don't. Well, yeah, I think you could. I think you could say Jeremy.
And then maybe
like
a Miles Turner, Miles Turner or Bam.
Bam's too good, isn't he?
Might be too good. Yeah.
Miles Turner's good. Rim protector. Will shoot threes. I question the Lou Dort thing a little bit.
It feels fun to have like an enforcer next to Iverson. Maybe Marcus Smart instead of.
Oh, Marcus Smart would be great on that Iverson team. Man, I love
Iverson, George. Let's say Iverson, Smart, George, Jeremy, and then I think we're up against it price wise. We probably got to go somebody a little bit less. You do need a shooter here. You really do.
But it's got to be a wing.
This is a center. I'm cutting Miles Turner in favor of.
Oh, you're cutting Miles Turner.
A cheaper center if we're going Marcus Smart there.
Covington.
Instead of, we're switching everything. I don't think you want to switch everything. I think you want a rim protection around Iverson.
You're a good point. Good point.
That's why Miles Turner is kind of. There's not that many like small ball. There's not that many like 3-and-D centers. We're thinking about it. I mean,
Ibaka.
Yeah, Ibaka's a good answer. I was going to say Maxi Kleber, but I think Ibaka's a good answer.
All right. If this comes from a bag of popcorn, if the Sixers roster and coaches had a Hunger Games, who would come out on top and who would go down first?
The coaches?
No, coaches and roster.
I could see Sam Cassell winning. I like Sam Cassell. We've talked about this before. I want to know more about what he does. Is there a way? Can we get Sam Cassell on the podcast?
Do you want me to ask?
Would they give us Sam Cassell? I would love to talk to Sam Cassell.
Well, didn't he do some press the other day? Or no, Jaeger did some press the other day. I'll ask for Sam Cassell. Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Worst they can say is no.
And ask him if he says no, then he has to win a Hunger Games against the rest of the roster.
Don't you think Shake would win the Hunger Games? Shake or Poirier?
Matisse loses first. Matisse offers to photog it. That's great. Thanks, Matisse. I can see Tobias taking it very seriously and forging alliances and stuff.
Joel wouldn't last.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'll say Tobias. Tobias
Here's a jigsaw. You must choose one option. Two more. This one and one more. Your first choice is to stop watching Sixers games right now. You never find out how Joel comes back from his injury. You never find out how the process works. You can't check the internet for results or even ask your friend what happens. You have to completely stop following basketball forever. Your podcast will have to stop because you don't know what to talk about. All your charitable work stop.
We've done a lot of podcasts about not basketball.
Basketball.
So the podcast might not have to stop.
Yeah, the basketball stopped. We kept doing podcasts.
I do think that if I stopped watching basketball, I would have to no longer be on the podcast because there's at least a through line of basketball. We deviate to other storylines, but I do think there has to be some meat to it.
Well, at least you can tell people what it's about if it's if they ask you. All your charitable work stop. Your network of sponsors abandon you, and the community of listeners are forced to listen to the Ringer network of basketball pods. For your second choice, you can continue watching Sixers basketball, and you can keep the pod. However, all you're allowed to watch are Sixers games from the 2020 Horford season. You must replay a game from, quote, Brett's Last Dance at least twice a week for the rest of your life, and then talk about it on the pod. Love you guys so much. You make my week twice a week. This is not even close. I would pick the first one. Who wants to watch this?
I couldn't watch any other basketball. In both scenarios, I'm not allowed to watch basketball ever again, aside from replays of last season.
Of the bad season. There's just no way I would take that. I would just not watch basketball at all.
No, I'll watch it.
Oh.
I'll watch the bad season.
That means you have to keep doing the pod, by the way, 2 times a week.
Look, I don't mind the money.
Okay. This comes from 76 Positive. I love this one. This is how I would sum up your pod. Spike. Okay, so sigh. I do think it's a thing, but it's not as much of a thing as people think. Mike. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But he's so good. He's so good, and I love him. P.S. Love the pod.
Sure. Yeah. I'd say it's give or take what it is.
Yeah. CMC1223 says, your dad retiring soon? Well, Mike, is your dad retiring?
Well, he got furloughed during the beginning of COVID and really liked it.
Yeah.
So I think he's ready to. But I don't think quite yet.
And then finally, what is the least amount of money? What is the least amount of money you would accept to receive in order to have your nipples disappear? There is no pain. You just don't have nipples anymore. I don't know. I would do it for, I don't know, $100. I don't care.
You wouldn't. To
Who
not have
cares?
nipples for the rest of your life, you would do it $100?
What do I need nipples for? I mean,
Glamour?
$1,000. What's that?
Fashion? Glamour?
No, not me. Maybe you. I don't need them to nurse. I'm past the age for that.
I have great nipples. I wouldn't do it for less than $10,000.
Oh, wow. That's a hot take right there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, coming up next are...
this is the beginning?
Well, yeah, we're putting the keynote speech...
Oh, I thought I was acting as if we had keynote spoke already.
Well, we did speak, but we didn't play it yet.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? We definitely were playing the recording. We're talking about this on Saturday, but the recording happened yesterday on Friday.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So. Go Sixers tonight. What do you think's going to happen tonight against the Kings? We know obviously what Seth Curry's status is.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad that he's his status is what it is.
What it is.
And I think it's good for Maxey to play or sit.
Right.
But yeah, I love Rashawn. I'm excited to see some Rashawn.
From Mattman456, if you could tongue kiss one Sixers bench player from 2010 to 2020, who would it be and why?
If I could tongue kiss one Sixers bench player from 2010 to 2020.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear that it's Hollis. That's sort of my whole thing.
That's your bit. Yeah.
I don't think it's a bit.
Well, that's your thing. I don't say bit as in I wasn't saying it as in like fake thing. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll talk to you later this week. On the day the podcast's out is the day that we recorded it, as always.
That's right. And by now you've already obviously seen Young Rock and you loved it. My episode, which is on Hulu, and there's a bunch of Miami Hurricane stuff that you loved and enjoyed, and everyone's talking about it nonstop.
Huge. Continue to DVR it or watch it on demand or Hulu or.
That's right.
You watch it on the website, maybe? Do they have it on the website? On the
yeah.
NBC? The Peacock app, maybe?
All of it. Same time.
All right.
And let's get to learning something about, how about Cal State Fullerton? You finally get to pretend like you're a Cal State Fullerton student, like you always have wanted. And here we go.
Here it is. Imagine this is how it would be. Mike, you know what I'm hoping returns this summer? Yeah, I don't think we had it last summer because we were in the throes of COVID, and hopefully we're coming out of it here. I hope we have the return of the LL Pavorsky Cabana sale.
It's always Cabana time.
Yep.
With LL. Wait, we're doing another LL commercial? Didn't we just do one?
Well, no, that was
days ago?
That was days ago.
Days ago by now? Clearly by my other shirt?
And
a new arrangement of the background and a lighting change?
Mike, I was wearing a completely different hat and I had a sweatshirt on. I'm wearing a T-shirt with a purple hat. I was wearing a black
different hat. Not even a similar hat.
No, it's a different hat. LL, Cabana sale I like the most because I love the cartoon Pavorsky. I would love for somebody to just get a cartoon Pavorsky tattoo. I know I make everything into tattoos, but I would love to see a cartoon Pavorsky. Look, I assume there'll be a Cabana sale this summer, but if you need an engagement ring, you don't have time to wait for a Cabana sale. And LL is going to not only get you the best price on the engagement ring, take enough time with you, make you feel special, get the exact ring you want. Don't worry about, you don't have to be super rich. You don't have to, you don't need a ring that's thousands and thousands of dollars. If you do, LL will take care of you. If you have a lower budget, LL will take care of you. Treats everybody the same, and that is with great care, great respect. He is the best. And if you don't need an engagement ring, you're already married, or if you're not married and you want a great pair of diamond earrings or bracelet or whatever the fuck, go to LL Pavorsky Jewelers. Make an appointment. Only appointment right now. 215-627-2252. Lee at llpavorsky.com or at llpavorsky on Twitter. Don't be confused by all the weird Sixers tweets. He is a respected jeweler. Always a supporter of our charities, Coded by Kids and the Providence Animal Center. LL Pavorsky Jewelers.
Also got a vaccine, not tonight, but days ago. Surely. Same as me days ago.
Days ago.
For sure.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This will be the keynote event for the 14th Annual Conferences on Literature, Culture, and Languages for the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures at Cal State Fullerton. And I'd like to introduce the person with me who will be helping to ask the questions. Nina Crecia is a student music, composition, and theory in the master's program at Cal State Fullerton, has served as student assistant in modern languages and literatures. And I'll put in a plug for Nina. Nina will be presenting at this very conference today at 12 o'clock to talk about her original adaptation as an opera of the book, The Little Prince. So thank you, Nina, for joining in and helping me out with the questioning today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And of course, I need to introduce our keynote guests. So we're joined today by Spike Eskin and Mike Levin. I am honored that both of you are here to join us today. Spike is a brand manager at 94 WIP in Philadelphia, and he has a number of responsibilities in his portfolio at WIP, including hiring talent and brand management and online content. And we're also joined by Mike Levin, who is a Los Angeles-based writer for television comedy. And Mike has among his credits a number of sitcoms. The one that's currently airing is Young Rock, Tuesday nights on NBC, but he has also written for other programs, including The Grinder and Perfect Harmony and Trial and Error. And then I guess the one that didn't end up running, but for which you wrote, Brotherly Love, based on current Philadelphia 76ers star Ben Simmons and his brother and his family relationships. And I have to say early and often the name, right? I can't overlook the fact that the reason why you're both here together with us is you are co-hosts of one of the all-time great podcasts, The Rights to Ricky Sanchez. So let me get that out of the way right now so I don't get blasted later on for not mentioning the way that I know of you and your work. I've been listening to The Rights to Ricky Sanchez as the podcast for many years now, and I'm a fan of your work there as well. And I thought this would be an opportune time to welcome you in, introduce you to our university community, and hear what you have to say to us, to our students, about how language and culture and your knowledge of those things intersects with the work that you do in your professional lives and in your lives as world-renowned podcasters. So thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Your intro is
Great intro.
in its graciousness and yeah, thank you.
Well, Lou, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm noticing I'm feeling a little nervous because you two are some of my most favorite celebrities, and I mean that sincerely. Podcasts are the way that I consume most of my knowledge right now, or the way I get most of it in these days. So I really enjoy, even though I don't watch all the games, I listen to every podcast for sure. So Spike and Mike, we'll start with what I guess would be considered kind of a layup. You must have had some kind of background in high school or college in language, right? Did either of you ever study any other languages in high school or college?
I took I mean, I don't have a background in it. I took French in high school and Spanish in college, but I don't remember much of either. So I was a broadcast journalism major in college, and never, and then worked in music radio for like 15 years. So not much of a background in what you're doing. No.
I took Spanish for a long time in high school, and I kind of growing up went to Hebrew school and read a lot of Hebrew and spoke some for a long time in there. And then have just been butchering English for quite some time.
How about international travel? I know that you've spoken sometimes on the pod, Spike, about Aruba, and Mike, I'm not sure, have either of you traveled outside the United States other than Aruba?
Not much. I went to Israel for Birthright maybe 10, 15 years ago, and have traveled a little bit outside the country, but really I was accidentally took a wrong turn in Niagara Falls and went to the Canadian side by mistake, and was detained for quite some time. But I have not traveled internationally nearly as much as I want to. I've done a lot of driving cross country got a lot of America, but need to get out to see more of the world.
Fantastic.
Yeah, my only international travel was about 15 years ago. I went to Italy for a week with my then girlfriend, and we broke up the first night of the trip, which was really cool. It was a really great trip, as you can imagine. So that's my only international travel. My wife and I did once plan a Croatian vacation, and she determined that I was too annoying to plan with, so we went to Portland instead. That's my international travel, and I was in Canada twice.
I have an email to read you, Mike. I have an email to read you.
We're just jumping right in.
Yeah, this comes. Well, no, this isn't the AMA. That's already going on. This is a commercial.
Okay.
I've
had a great time so far.
Okay. Yeah, it's been great. Well, but our commercials are good, so listen to this. We have the best commercials. It's not like we're not reading an ED script, We're actually talking about the sponsors that we know and have met and actually believe in.
Is that a Keep on Pay subtweet in back-to-back episodes?
No. Did I say, I didn't say anything about it. No, that was fucking awesome. That read was legendary. Yeah. That was great. I have to send another great email on behalf of, and by the way, I don't have any problem with the ED products. I have a problem with reading the script, right? I have to send another great email on behalf of Kornblau and Kornblau. Despite not being in PA and having my question regarding how to deal with a shitty landlord who won't fix shit, Adam helped us. There are holes in the floor, mold in the walls, shit in the dishwasher, and all we get is excuses and no solution. I wish we didn't have to pay shit to live here. Everything having to do with the landlord has been shitty. That's when we called Kornblau. He spent his precious time working to help us understand the law and our options going forward, all for nothing. I wish more people were like him, and not everyone was always so concerned with money. Seriously, he's the best. Thank you, Kornblau. That was from Brian from the Love Boat. That's his name. So really, really good email. Kornblau and Kornblau is the official law firm of the process. The amazing thing about that email, you're like, okay, so the lawyer helped them with a law issue. Well, Kornblau and Kornblau is a personal injury law firm, not a shitty landlord law firm. But Adam is such a good dude and loves helping our people so much. That's what he does. So I will say, if you need legal help with anything, go to Kornblau and Kornblau, go to Adam. He will, if he's not the guy for you, he will send you to the right person. Kornblau and Kornblau, 40 years of incredible personal injury lawsuit results. 40 years of them. You're hurt. You don't want to just shrug it off if you think somebody might be at fault, if it's a slip and fall situation, an injured at work situation, a drunk driving, a car accident situation. You got to go to Kornblau. You're not going to have to worry about anything. You think, I don't want to go through hassle. It's not hassle with Kornblau. He's there to help you. He's helped a lot of our people, and he can help you. And as the emailer showed, if you have a different sort of issue, he can help you with that as well. Doesn't cost you anything if you give him a call. 215-576-7200. Ask for Adam, or email Kornblau, KORNBLAU, at kornblauandkornblau.com. Kornblau and Kornblau, the official law firm of the process.
Wonderful. Well, work with English is just fine and perfect. We in our department, we're not limited to languages other than English. We actually have a very good program in TESOL, which is Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, one of our most prominent programs. We do a master's degree there as well as some undergraduate courses. And so the no reticence whatsoever about not having pursued a language other than English should be had on your parts here. We've brought you on and invited you because we know that you're going to have a lot to tell us about how your knowledge of English language informs what you do, as well as give us some insights on culture. And in that respect, can we talk a bit about your work in your professional lives, your occupations? For instance, Mike, you've written for shows in which it seems to me you would have to do some research in order to write about the characters involved in your stories. And can you talk at all with us about what you've learned over the course of your career in terms of researching other cultures and using that information to create the storylines and the characters in your scripts for television?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so Young Rock is about Dwayne Johnson's childhood, and just a lot of times using it as the jumping off point to tell more universal stories and jokes, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's lived a bunch of places, and his family is part Samoan. And so writing for those characters, his family is part, how they would speak, what their references would be. And so it's a lot of just Googling, like, what was American Samoa like in 1983 or whatever, and figuring out like how we can make that more universal, how to make it funny, and just finding so much of comedy is just like blending the universality of an experience with like a very specific reference point. And so I think blending that, and the show I'm on now is about it takes place in Hawaii, and so has a similar different culture that I'm less familiar with. My writing partner is Korean American, and has family from Hawaii, so it's a similar place of like, okay, so this is where we're based, and then how can we make it both appealing to people that aren't less familiar, but also specific to that experience.
Great. Could I ask you a question, a follow-up, just based on the episode of Young Rock that just aired this past Tuesday, and that you wrote with your writing partner, Patrick, and I was struck by I think it was only a 2 or 3 second scene in which it seemed to do more than an establishing shot. It seemed to really establish the cultural environment in which the characters were operating. And so I'm referring to a scene in which we see on the wall a display of photos, and the way that the photos were displayed and the types of iconography. We had some necklaces hanging from the photos, and the frames and the appearance and the arrangement seemed very particular to that family. Is that something that you and your partner write into the script? Is that input from the director of photography? How does something like that happen, that you can establish so quickly, succinctly, expertly the cultural environment of your characters in a one-take shot like that? How does that happen?
Yeah, I would say that it's part written into the script from Patrick and I, and also the showrunners Nahnatchka Khan and Jeff Chang, and part like the production designer takes it and runs with it, the set dresser takes it and runs with it and does research and brings it to the table, as well as the director of that particular episode, which is all based on like Dwayne and what his family was going through, and what specifics that he can remember from there, and how we can quickly convey in just a short amount of time a different kind of experience, just sort of like setting the table of what we're in for. I will say that due to COVID, Young Rock shot entirely in Australia, or almost entirely in Australia. So I was not able to be on set for it, which is now the second time the show I've been on is shot in a country that I was not allowed to come to set for. So that's a little more difficult. Trial and Error season 2, which is another show I was on, shot in Vancouver. And so it's interesting when you write a script and you're like, so invested in it at the early stages, and then months later it's being produced, and you're like, well, I wonder how that's going. I think it's going okay. I hope so. And then months later, then it comes on television. You're like, oh, well, I remember that vaguely. That's something we did. And so yeah, so I definitely don't want to take credit for any of the production design on that episode, but I do think like those kinds of techniques of how to quickly convey like this family is this kind of family, and this is, you know, part of their experience, and this is how I think it's an easy way and a revealing way of just how the design of their home is revealing as to like the kinds of just the kinds of people that they are, and what's important to them and stuff.
Sure. It seemed to me like a very positive and heartwarming reflection on those people as characters. The fact that family is so central to their lives, and extended family as well, that they keep close to them in that way. And Spike, in your work at WIP, I'm sure that you have to think all the time about reaching different audiences and how the hiring decisions that you make are going to be able to draw in listeners, right? Or even to expand the map at your station. What kinds of decisions or information do you use to inform those types of decisions that you make in terms of strategizing, expanding your listening audience at WIP?
So the same way I think Mike and his work use humor as that sort of unifying factor, we use sports, you know, as sort of like the communal thing. In Philadelphia, you know, sports are big in most US cities, but Philadelphia is definitely sort of different in the importance it places on sports. You were mentioning earlier people learning English. I've been in cars with people. I remember having an Uber driver that told me that he learned English a good part from listening to WIP, and he did speak a certain way that I definitely believed him after that. So I think it's two things. The first thing is we do get an okay, I would say, amount of research from Nielsen, the same company that monitors TV, monitors radio. So we have a good idea of, you know, culturally, age, gender, who's listening to the radio station. But then I would guess, fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of it is sort of gut, and who will resonate with the people that you've seen and you've come into contact with. I think one of the good things about radio, at least up until the last year, is that, and especially sports radio, is that you interact with your audience so much between phone calls and events and all of those sorts of things. So you take the research that you have, and then you also take hey, I've been there and I'm listening. And then when you're hiring, you think about how that person and that person's experience will sort of feed into the communal nature of what WIP is. And ever since, you know, I grew up listening to Howard Stern, and I know a lot of your students probably haven't, but one of the things that always struck me about Stern as a radio host wasn't so much the humor, it was that if you would tune in at any one time, you would really have no idea what was going on, right? There were inside jokes, there were lines of conversation that you wouldn't know unless you were listening for a while. But there was something about it that you wanted to be a part of, whether it was funny to you, whether you understood the joke or not, there was something funny about it that you wanted to be part of that group. And I think through the pod, but through radio as well, the goal is always just the radio through a much bigger audience than we have through the podcast, much wider, I think, net, is that you want to create a communal experience for the people that are in, that they feel like they're going through something together with others, even though they're not in the same room, but that they get something and understand something that others do not, that they're sort of part of a club. And that's the goal, to show through all of it. So I would say that the podcast is more of a boutique version of that, whereas the radio is, I guess, sort of a more Walmart version of it, because you need to appeal to a larger group. So there's, you know, you need to pick bigger unifying factors, but that's a long answer. But I would say that's what goes into hiring, is how can we create a community of people that come from all these different races and all these different age groups through this one unifying factor of sports, and can this person do it?
Fantastic. Nina, I'm going to turn the question responsibilities over to you just after I mention something I'd forgotten to mention, that if you're listening right now, watching along with this, and you'd like to submit a question for later on in the session, please make use of the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions there, and then Nina and I will browse through those toward the end of the session, and I'll defer to Nina to pick a few for us. But Nina, please go ahead.
Yeah, Spike, it's interesting you mentioning learning English from a podcast or something, because I'm originally from Germany and I don't. And when my wife watched that show, she definitely was like, now I understand. So
Yeah.
I think that's true. Maybe starting with you, Mike. I think both of you have different areas that you kind of have been in workplaces. How has, in regards to culture, maybe talking about diversity and inclusivity, how has your workplace maybe changed in that over the years that you've been in your careers?
Oh, a lot. Television's interesting in the sense that, like, when you are filling out a cast, it has to be, whoever wrote the project, it has to be like who they envisioned for it. And so it's a very like conscious choice of we envision this character as this kind of person, and I'm going to butcher the qualifications, but we had like a seminar that we just went through for the show I'm on, and it's like the only you can't discriminate based on an actor based on the character you're trying to portray. So if you envision the I'm butchering it as I'm saying it, but if you envision the character as the character is, Canadian or Mexican or Latinx or whatever it is, then you're basically searching for that type of person, that person with that background that you're trying to fill this role from, which you obviously kind of can't do as much in just regular hiring as a job and stuff. And so I think that there's been a lot more consciousness over just I'm 31. So over the like 9 years that I've been in the television business, a lot more conscious of trying to fill out a diverse cast with a diverse set of experiences, but also within a writer's room of just trying to get, because so much of you watch older shows. Cheers is a show I'm watching right now, and just everybody's white. Just everybody on the show is white, and it's a funny show. But like at the time, it's just like, man, I'm sure there were other experiences we're not getting from this. At this time, and based on just like here's a bunch of white folks from Boston, and so as well as in the writing staff, I think it's reflected in that, like in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and still a lot of the time. I'm not here to say that it's 100% better, but it's definitely made progress over the 9 years that I've been doing this, because and I think it's especially a lot of shows. Maybe not so much on network television, but a lot of shows on cable and streaming, coming from a different point of view and different perspectives that you wouldn't necessarily have seen a couple years ago. And I think that makes the television landscape a lot more rich because of it.
Yeah, that's great to hear that more diversity is definitely represented in both the on-screen and also in the writer's room.
Yeah, for sure.
Spike, how about the radio industry? How has diversity and inclusivity maybe changed over the years in that field?
So I've been in radio, I'm 44, and I've been doing it since I was 20. So, you look around, it's a really good example of how difficult it is. There's been a lot of talk over the last year about institutional racism, and it is a good example of how hard it is to change it, because you look now and you're like, well, most sports talk hosts are white and most programmers are white males. And then you think, well, when I go to hire somebody, all of the applications I get are white males. And you think to yourself, well, that's not because only white males are interested. It's because only white males have always done it. And how do we change that, right? So I think back to when I started, when I was 20 or 21 at a rock radio station. And I think how that atmosphere must have been for somebody who was gay, or somebody who was a woman, and you could even forget, or somebody who was Black. We did have a couple of Black men that worked at the rock radio station I worked at. And just like the overall atmosphere was terrible. And I'm not to say that it was blatantly racist or homophobic or sexist, but there was a tone and an undertone of it. Like I think about how I talked back then, when I'm talking to friends that are gay now, and like, I can't believe that was the same person that I am now. So I would say that now when we go to hire and we go to think about inclusivity, it's just something that you have to make an extra effort for, because it's not going to be the first person that applies to our job at WIP is most likely not going to be a woman. It's not going to be a person of color. But I'm proud in the changes we have made, looking at the changes now compared to 20 years ago. We had a host on a producer on our afternoon show who was on air a couple of years ago, who was out and gay. And I was actually, when he told me that he was going to just talk that way on air, I was actually terrified for him, given, that the audience is mostly 45-year-old white males from sports fans from Philadelphia. And in the 2 years he was producer, we didn't receive one negative comment, and he didn't receive one negative comment. And that we've been able to use a pride logo for WIP over the last 2 years and not receive negative comments and be able to take steps that way, I think shows the openness. And I've also seen the openness to hosts that are there that have been there for a long time, and all of those things, understanding how they have to think and how they have to talk and how we have to not just make those hires, but make it seem like a place that those people would want to work at. So I would say the change has clearly not been enough, right? But is happening slowly but surely. But you need to constantly remind yourself and those around you how you have to think when there is an opportunity to add, or even just in the words that we use on the air.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. In terms of your work with language in particular, I was wondering if you could speak a bit to the people whom you admire in your professions. I know, Spike, you've mentioned having listened to Howard Stern, who I found to have become a really thoughtful interviewer as of late. Less of the shock value, I think, although I don't listen to him. I hear clips of him and hear him speaking. And Mike, you mentioned Cheers is something you're watching, and you're watching through a current lens and thinking how could this have been, right, with the casting. And this would certainly not be appropriate today. I'm wondering, though, if you can tell me, when you look at television shows, Mike, if there are particular writers or shows that you admire in terms of your own craft, and why that is. And Spike, on your behalf, if there are, what it is that you admire or look for in particular hosts when you make decisions, what skills and what sort of qualities you seek out when you're trying to make a very important decision about who's going to host that drive time slot on your station. So I'll let it up to you to decide who answers first.
Sure. So who I admired is tough. When I was first in radio, it was actually Stern, a DJ on a hip hop radio station named Golden Boy, was the guy that I liked all the time. It was funny when you start on air and radio, you just sort of rip off the people that you liked. And I remember ripping off this hip hop DJ, and I remember my boss saying, all right, that's not what we do. Like you can't take exactly what he did. What you're looking for in radio, and you mentioned sort of knowing Mike and I from listening all those years, is that you understand you really have a one-to-one relationship with your listener, or in my case, a 2-to-1 relationship. People listen to podcasts by themselves, they listen to radio by themselves, and it's almost as if you're having a one-sided conversation with somebody, with a bunch of people, but all individual conversations. So what we look for, or what I look for, is a person who understands that, and who even in a team show understands, like we talk about a team show, I talk about it as a visual space to them, that they always have to be facing the audience, even if they're talking to each other. And if they just have a conversation between the two of them, and that's sort of the difference between radio and podcast, because podcasts usually are just talking to each other, whereas radio, you do have to constantly face the audience. And I tell them, if it doesn't sound like you're looking at them, then you better be really, really interesting, because they're just eavesdropping on your conversation. And it's a different thing than talking to them. So we look for somebody who can relate to that one person listening to them. And I would say I also look for them, at least in sports, to say that our listeners love sports, but they have lives. They have wives and mortgages and husbands and children, and they cannot pay attention to sports in the same way that we do. And what they're looking for is a thought and an argument that you have time to come up with that they don't. Almost that you can say something that if they had the time to put it into words, you've given it to them. And when they're arguing with their friends, they have this armed with. Or something that is so interesting that they disagree with that they want to bring it up to somebody else. So what I want them always to do is to think of something interesting enough to create conversation or have somebody want to steal. And if you can do all of those things, if you can relate on a one-to-one basis, not seem like you're some kind of expert, you're just one of them, just somebody who has more time to spend on it, and have them want to parrot it in one way or another, either I can't believe this idiot said this, or boy, he really put into words what I was thinking, then that's a win. So that's what I look for.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously, different arena for me. As far as podcasts go, I don't listen to a ton of sports podcasts because I'm already taking in so much all the time. But Bomani Jones is a guy that I listen to a lot and think he's great and incredibly himself, and has a way of just like speaking with authority and humor, and also like learnedness that I strive for and will never get because I don't prepare. Spike knows. But as far as TV goes, yeah, I'm a comedy writer, and so it becomes, a lot of people watch TV comedies to like relax or just wind down or whatever it is. It's become over the course of the however many long years I've been a writer, it's become work, and so it's hard to watch a lot of comedies and take enjoyment out of it, aside from just like my brain is working. It is part of the part of me that goes like that, I can beat that joke, or this story doesn't track, or this character, or whatever it is, or just feeling jealous that like I should have done this. This was either they should have hired me first of all, let's be honest, or like, oh, I wish I had come up with this for my own show or whatever it is. But as far as thinking about it on what I think network TV gets a bad rap a lot of the time of being like boring or dumb or repetitive or whatever it is, and some of that's true. But I think it also has the ability, more than any other platform, to feel like you're falling in love with an ensemble, and like the group of people that come together for whatever reason, whether it's a workplace or a bar or just because they're friends or whatever. And so, I think about like Parks and Rec as a show that has a bunch of people from different walks of life coming together, working at this, local government, and feeling like it's both fun and informative and funny, and these people like care about each other, and I think that's the best version of network television, is when it's a group of people that like love each other and also are very funny together as they're doing something that you wouldn't normally see. And I think that's kind of what I strive for in my comedy, for sure.
If I could just piggyback on one thing Mike said about, network comedies getting criticism for, how they are. I think sports radio sometimes gets a little bad rap because of the what I'll hear sometimes is, well, you guys are just trying to cause a fight, or you're coming up with this story simply to make people argue. That's not really exactly true. I don't work with anybody who's disingenuous about what they say, but the truth is that if you're saying something that everybody knows and everybody already agrees with, there's no conversation there. Like there's nothing interesting there. You can say that, and it can be part of what you're talking about, but the sort of like base of what you're talking about has to have another side, or it's not interesting. There's nothing interesting about something that you can't debate about. So I think while we do tend to lean towards storylines that have other sides, it's not to create conflict or polarization. It's that the things that everybody already agrees on, man, my hosts do 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Go ahead and do 4 hours a day, 5 days a week on stuff that everybody already agrees on. It'll be a very short show. I can promise you, you'll get to, if your show is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., you'll get to about 10:06, and then you'll start reading the newspaper on air. So I think there is a misconception. There's certainly hosts that are not good at what they do, who say things just to get people angry. But I think that's in all sorts of entertainment. There are cheap ways to do everything, and there are uncheap ways to do everything. And I would hate I don't like that our format sometimes is defined by those who do it in a cheap way, because I don't think most hosts are doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Going off that, I think both of you have in common that you're in your professional role as a comedy writer and as a program manager, you're working more behind the scenes. But as podcast representatives, you're on air. Do your voices on air differ from your professional voices in that podcast? And what are the freedoms or restrictions of both different worlds?
I have just the one voice. This is it. There's nothing else. Spike probably.
Yeah, I have several different voices. Well, I mean, I'm a manager, right? So I manage a lot of employees, and most of them, or at least the on-air version, have been doing what they do for a long time, very successfully. And they're at, WIP is one of the 2 or 3 sort of premier sports talk radio stations. It's been for over 30 years. So my role there and my voice there is, I wouldn't say deferential, but more sort of, like I can be a snarky kind of asshole on the podcast. And if I'm that way in managing, boy, my hosts are not going to like me at all. So I would say that voice is different. And it's more about trying to assist them and coach them into what I think is interesting, as opposed to me telling them what to say or what my opinion is. And then also in terms of we're partners with the Phillies and the Eagles. So whereas I can be pretty opinionated about the Sixers, and Mike knows from when we've talked about the Phillies and Eagles on the podcast, I basically have no opinions, because my job is to manage the relationship between our radio station, who can be oftentimes very critical of those teams, and the teams themselves. And I have to stay sort of publicly neutral on those things. So, and the added layer of ultimate, the podcast is big, but ultimately my job at WIP is to make our host big, not me. I want them to be forward. It's also been interesting. The last thing I'll say is I do some Sixers talk on air, and I have to frame I always almost not hate when our podcast listeners to listen to me on air, but hope they understand that I have to frame things a little bit differently, because on WIP, I'm talking to mass market, and I'm talking to people who don't only care about the Sixers or don't watch every single Sixers game. Whereas on the right, Ricky Sanchez, we're talking to mega fans. And on WIP, I'm talking to general market. So I sort of have to generalize what I say and sort of top line it a little bit more. And when we do on podcasts, we can talk about the 9th guy on the Sixers or Mike can at least talk about the 9th guy on the Sixers for 22 straight minutes, and our listeners won't get bored. But it doesn't work that way on the radio.
Mm-hmm. Mike, you said your voice doesn't change, but I'm wondering, in writing, does it change depending on what actor you're writing for?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's, part of being a TV writer, at least the way my partner Patrick and I have done it, is we staff on other people's shows. And so you are, Young Rock is created by Nanashka Khan, who's Iranian American, and Jeff Chang, who I believe is Chinese American. And so we have to, basically, we're pitching jokes or storylines or whatever it is to make them happy. Be like, hey, do you like this? because we want you to put it in the show. And so inherently you are, there's jokes when I'm on someone else's show that's like, this isn't a joke for me. I wouldn't put this joke in my show, but this is the kind of thing they're looking for. And so I'm pitching in their voice. And so I think there is some of that on staff. Then when Pat and I are writing our own stuff, then whether it's development or whatever it is, it becomes, okay, this is an us joke, or this is an us storyline that we can use. And so I think there's always, you're tailoring your behavior of what jokes or what you're saying, or when you're not talking. Like so much of being in a comedy room, and right now the comedy room, my past 2 shows have been over Zoom, and so it's in a different kind of behavioral situation, but you're always sort of tailoring yourself of how much am I talking, what am I like, not pushing back too much. It's an odd thing, and there's ways to, because it's so many personalities in one room for such a long period of time. As you're coming up with the show and writing the stuff, it becomes the language that you use and that you choose to use becomes very important, because if you say something in a way, or you push back in a way, or use these kinds of words, then you get a reputation for being like, oh, they're hard to work with or something. So you're always sort of, comedy rooms are weird because it's like you want to be as natural and as calm and as comfortable as possible to be able to say anything. But you want to come off that way, but it also is like, if you are that way, then you could get in real trouble, because it is still a workplace. It's like an odd sort of conundrum to be in.
There's a question in the chat. So is The Rock going to run for president? Will Mike write about a presidential run, from Alexander Smith?
I hope not. I hope he does not, because then I will feel complicit in whatever happens out of that. I think there was a joke a couple years ago about like trying to get him to run. I think he's, anybody that's a big famous person, I think, toys with the idea of like, well, I could do something important, like be president or whatever it is. I hope this scratches that itch for Dwayne, who's been great. I don't want to be responsible for any bad policy in the future because I wrote on his comedy in 2020.
Would make for great podcast fodder as The Rock becomes the worst president of all time.
I don't need it. You got other stuff to talk about. I'm fine.
The sheer hubris and audacity of the power, right. They think that they're qualified for these jobs just because of their power and their fame, right? To follow up on Nina's question, Mike, when you write for characters, you're in a way assuming these other voices, right? You're sort of channeling another voice to a character, and I'm wondering, this might not be the most discreet format in which to talk about when actors' choices have undermined what you've written, but do you know of examples, and I'm sure that happens, right? But do you have any examples of when something that you have written has been enhanced or elevated because of the acting performance?
Totally. I mean, it is such an odd thing. Like when you're a novelist, you are in charge of everything. There is one voice and it's yours, and you're not depending on anybody. In television, film production, you are writing words for humans to say, and they're going to have their own perspective of whether they want to say them, whether they agree with the line or the joke or the character choice. And so, when you're parsing, you write something, you spend hours and hours, months, years, usually years on something, and you're sitting with it. And then when you get lucky enough or fortunate enough, or you push hard enough to get it through to be actually produced, you've been sitting with these lines for so long. And then you get an actor to say it, and they are coming in with their own biases and stuff. And sometimes you want them to feel natural, like you want it to feel like it feels normal coming out of their mouth, but there's also the blend of like, well, just say it it's written this way for a reason. And so I think and then some actors, it's really varies from actor to actor, like who wants to like zhuzh it up a little bit, and sometimes the zhuzhing makes it good, makes it feel natural and feel more conversational and not feel as written, which is what you ultimately want. But then sometimes it becomes, well, you're doing it in a certain way, and that loses the joke. And so it's always the blend of wanting the line to feel real, wanting it to feel like it's authentically coming out of this person's mouth, but also not loosening the reins so much that that you lose what the intent of the line or whatever it is. And I've certainly, when I was younger and had things produced, I think everybody goes through this, but I had a little bit more of a tight hold on like, no, this is the line for this. But I think you really just have to loosen that up and find the script is what it is. And then when you get it produced, it becomes another thing, and you have to just live with that and find how that's going to work the best, because you can't just, it's not a controlled environment. There's a lot of variables in it, and you have to kind of just roll with the punches. It's a really interesting thing.
So this past Tuesday, the episode that you and your writing partner Patrick had written aired, the Young Rock episode. I think it's the 4th episode of the season. I guess the sequence isn't really important considering the way that it jumps back and forth in time, right? But
right.
You've gotten quite a bit of traction on that episode regarding the conversation on the topic of mental health, which is very timely, very important right now. And one of the things that sort of prompts this question about your words being elevated, right, is the line that Dwayne Johnson delivers when he's talking to an interviewer, Kenny Smith, about seeking help for mental health issues. So he's just had a conversation with his father as a first-year college student at University of Miami. We cut to, I guess, some years projected into the future from where we are right now. And Dwayne Johnson is reflecting on this and on this conversation with his father and his father's cognizance of mental health issues, and delivers the line, "Asking for help is our superpower," which is so poignant and powerful as a written piece, right? But can you speak to the power of having someone of Dwayne Johnson's stature deliver that line right now at the time that we're living?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry. So much of comedy is just calling out the weird thing. And during that question, Nina drank from the biggest water bottle I've ever seen in my life. It was huge. It took up the whole frame. I briefly blacked out. It was amazing. Okay, now that I've called that out.
Can I see it again? I missed it. Just real quick.
It's enormous. It's massive. Look at that thing.
Oh my
God. That's a whole torso worth of water.
It's supposed to help me drink it all, but I obviously did not fill it up the way.
So yeah, I think it's interesting. The whole sort of conceit of the show is Dwayne's family. You know, Dwayne's dad is Rocky Johnson, a former professional wrestler, who had some success in the 70s and 80s, and then his career kind of tailed off. And Rocky actually, the person actually died earlier last year, basically right before the show, the writer's room started, but like 2 months before the writer's room started in 2020. And so I think that tailored what Dwayne wanted to say about his dad. I think he wanted to, maybe shave off some of the parts of him that he didn't really want the public to feel, but still present like a positive perception of him. But the benefit of having this show with Dwayne is that like we know that Dwayne Johnson ends up okay. He's fine. Like he's very successful, and in the world of the show, he's running for president. And so we can tell these stories about how all the times that he struggled based on the real times that he struggled, because it's a happy ending. So you can show what really happened in college, which is he got hurt, he had a ton of potential, and then he got deeply depressed, which happens in our episode, and almost ruined his whole college career because of his depression and how he stopped working out and stopped going to classes and almost got kicked out of school, all that stuff. And so it's a little bit easier there, especially on a network television sense, to tell like pretty darker, realer stories, because you know that Dwayne's going to be okay. But yeah, I think it was always sort of our intent of going, I've dealt with depression earlier in my life, and it's just the kind of thing where I don't know how innovative we were in the episode, aside from showing like, hey, even this guy suffered from depression in this time, even though he was a successful, highly ranked prospect in college football at the time. But the idea that you have to, just asking for help, I think is the kind of thing that we wanted to be clear about. And especially over the last few years, specifically in basketball, but really on all sports, like the talking about mental health has become so much more both accepted and encouraged. I think on the backs of like Kevin Love has spoken out about that. I think DeMar DeRozan has spoken out a lot about it. And there countless other people, Karl Anthony Towns, just talking frankly about how many of his family members have died from the pandemic. And I think that we just wanted to, with Nach and Chang blessing and guidance, it was, let's do an episode where Dwayne has everything and then he gets hurt and then he falls into this sort of darker path. And it was something that we took seriously and that we wanted to tell the story of. And I think having it come from Rocky, having the advice come from Rocky about asking for help, not just sort of going through it yourself, I think means a lot, because he is this big, strong guy. They're having this conversation at the gym, like the most masculine place to do anything. And them just opening up to each other as father and son, especially knowing that Rocky then died. Like, it's just, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up into it. And I think it was a pretty nice moment and well acted by those guys to convey what we're trying to convey and how sports have evolved as hopefully toxic masculinity has deteriorated. And you don't have to act tough all the time. You don't have to just like suffer through it yourself and pretend and put up this facade of masculinity and everything. So hopefully it spoke to some people and did the job.
So resonant for our students at Cal State as well, that many of them are first generation college students and are suffering from a lot of the anxieties that are evident in that episode, like imposter syndrome and do I belong here, right? And they're of that age. And to have that example of someone who's so successful, uber successful, say, ask for help. And so for any students watching or listening along right now, just know that you have resources at our school as well. And you certainly should ask for our help if you find yourself suffering from depression or anxieties, and we'll help get you the help that you need, right? And Spike,
can I just mention, like, that imposter syndrome, it never goes away.
Right.
So, like, as I mentioned, like, I'm 44. My job is great. I don't think there's a day that I wake up and I don't think that I'm ill prepared to do everything that I'm doing. I think the difference is I can't imagine. I would have been terrified to go see a therapist at 20, but at 44, like, you become humbled. As your body starts to fall apart, you realize how big the world is around you, and you realize how short it is. You're like, well, I shouldn't waste these next couple of years not seeing a therapist. So I think you're more. The one thing that you gain is just, or at least that I have, is being able to do that. I can only imagine people who are younger. I think like Mike doing that sort of thing, or even us mentioning on the podcast for our listeners who are younger, saying, like, young people, it's okay when you're not as sure about the world around you and what is okay and what isn't. And you may not have been through all of those things. I think it's important that he did that, and important that they did that and put it in the show, because I think it's a great message for people to hear.
For sure. And one thing that I really appreciate about the two of you on your podcast is that you talk openly about these things, and it really is requires a degree of courage and of caring. And so that's I'd like to use that as a lead into what might end up being our last question, which is to talk about the other element of the podcast that I find so special, so unique to what you two do, which is the community that you have built through this podcast. Spike, you alluded to it a bit when you answered the question regarding developing that relationship with the listener. I'm not aware of any podcast that's achieved what you two have achieved in terms of community. Can you speak a bit about the listening audience that you've been able to build over the years, and what that has meant for you as host of the podcast?
Well, I mean, for me, it's everything. The last year has been, revealing in so many ways, so many different things, right? It has been so hard for so many people. But I do remember when the NBA shut down a year ago. That was sort of the mark for everybody. It was the beginning of the pandemic, was when the NBA shut down. And I remember talking to Mike about, well, we still have to do the podcast 2 days. And his reaction was, well, there's no basketball. My only thought was, well, I need it, for my sense of normalcy to continue to do this. But we've received so many emails over the last year of that we were a sense of normalcy for people, which has been important to me. So not just that the charity stuff has been great, and all of the different people we've been able to raise. Is being able, we get emails now. It's like, hey, I started listening when I was 14 and I'm in med school now. And you're like, oh my God, what, like I've been part of this person's life as they've gone from being a child to a grown-up. I'm sorry, I'm sort of all over the place. I think at the end of the day, that the community that we have been able to be a part of, which includes people who have gotten married at our events. I officiated a marriage, somebody who's going to get a tattoo in May of Mike's one dumb idea Mike had in the middle of one podcast, but only to show that they are part of what we do. And every event, I've been very proud that every event we've ever gone to, and I've been to a lot of concerts in my life, and at every concert, there's somebody that bumps into and wants to fight, right? Like at every concert I've ever been to in my whole life. But at every Rights to Ricky Sanchez event, no matter how crowded they are, you can go to them alone, whether it's a trip for 3 days, people go alone and end up having this shared experience with everyone there. Everyone is nice and everyone is kind and everyone is cool to each other. And when I don't feel like staying up till 11:30 at night because I get up at 5 a.m. to record a podcast, I think to myself, boy, like this is not just important to me, it's important to these people who have been through this journey with us. And it's everything to me. I mean, that's why I think we continue to do it. I love it. And even I mentioned the charities, but our sponsors are largely local, small businesses. And even the ones who aren't, there's somebody who is part of the community who made the decision to have them be an advertiser for the podcast. And, being able to help watch those businesses grow, has been really special for me. So I think it's the most important thing that has come of it, honestly.
Yeah, I would say fandom inherently is an illness. Like it is, deeply, deeply dumb. You're just because we were born in Philadelphia, and not all Sixers fans were, but Spike and I particularly, just because we were born in Philadelphia, we become fans of this team, and then it becomes sort of, part of your identity, and you're rooting for guys that a lot of times you never met or don't really know much about, and you're just, rooting for clothing on their backs, so hoping that they win, and hope that, Sixers have never won a championship in my lifetime. But placing that as one of the big goals of my life, and hopefully in the near future of okay, well, if the Sixers win a championship, then I'm going to be really happy. That's going to be cool. And so thinking about the possibility of that is obviously really, ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing. But we do it. And a lot of people are fans of various teams, or, I guess in different ways, bands, or plenty of fandom inherently. But sports fandom has, I think, especially that community feel that you want to feel like you're a part of something. And specifically the Sixers, for reasons that we really don't need to get into on this platform, have felt like an experience over the last decade. And the sort of unique quality of that, I think, has spawned a unique community around the team. And so it's nice to feel like you're a part of something. And when you remember, this guy that didn't work out, or this guy that got hurt, or feeling like finally after years of struggle, then the Sixers are now at this place. Like, it's cool to feel like we're a part of that, and our listeners are a part of that. And it's nice that everybody's nice, and it's a good thing. It's a very lucky, and if we had tried to plan it out in a way that this would happen, it would never have happened. It just had to sort of be an organic thing where Spike and I, for whatever reason, do this podcast, and nobody fights at our events except for Spike and I, and people like it enough to feel like they're a part of something, and a lot of people meet through the podcast, or whether at various events or whatever. And it is something I'll never be able to like speak eloquently about, because it's such a unique situation, and it all happened organically because of just this weird team that we all love and hate together, and it becomes part of, I think, everybody's identity in a nice way. And it's cool that we're all kind of along for the ride together.
This is our year. It's going to happen this year. It's a special team this year. Well, I just have to say what an honor it's been to have you at this event. A real pleasure to speak to both of you. I hope this has gone well for you. I'll follow up to make sure that your experience was a positive one, and I'll be in touch about the recording of the session as well, Spike. I have to say, Nina, again, crushed it. Just outstanding work on your part. Thanks so much for joining in and for helping with the questions. I'll say, watch Young Rock on NBC, listen to Rights to Ricky Sanchez, and Spike, you also have a second podcast in your budding podcast empire, Carl Landry Record Club, your other love of music in addition to sports. And I don't think we have to go down through all the sponsors. You can do those ad reads later on. If you need me to help with ad reads, hit me up. I'll be happy to talk about LL Jewelers and Baby and Kornblau and Kornblau, et cetera. Big Barker, obviously. But really, seriously and sincerely, thanks so much for joining us today, and a real treat to speak with you. And I think you've honored our event through your participation.
Really honored that you asked. So thank you for having me.
Thank you both. This was great.